Thank you so much for having me. I'm really grateful to be here and to get the opportunity to share with you. I'm going to see if this works. I'm hoping. Too far away? Can I like magic point it that way? You know what I can do is I can hold the mic and stand over there. Yeah, but I have to, it's a lot of flipping, so this, we're going to make it work. I'm just rolling it. Is there just an arrow I can push? Yeah, I'm going to do that. Yeah? So thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. So I am an interdisciplinary scholar, and I really think that defines my work. My background is I have degrees in studio art and the natural sciences and the social sciences, and I think it's really, it defines the way I approach problems like that of plastic pollution. So I've spent the last 20 years researching water policy, and in the most recent past that has really focused on plastic, which I think of most frequently as the problem of single-use plastic. You know, the things that we all know, we see all the time, that are created to be used for a moment, but then last a lifetime or several lifetimes. And you, I'm sure, have heard about this issue, and you may know that in the 1950s, global plastic markets were producing about 5 million tons of plastic every year. And by the late 20-teens, that was upward of 350 million tons every year. And when you read the documentation from the plastic industry, they make very clear that they would like this number to increase every year moving forward. So, recycling is often touted as sort of a solution to this problem. But what we know is that 95% of plastic packaging is not recycled. And 90.5% of all plastic ever made has never been recycled. And you probably see it in your everyday lives. It's all around us and sort of surrounds us. And it causes a huge problem for the environment because of this. But I'm going to focus on the way it affects wildlife because that's been informing my recent work. Hey, there we go. Wait for it. There we go. Okay. I know, I should have given a warning. I'm sorry. So the primary ways that it affects wildlife are through entanglement and ingestion. And this is the Laysan albatross, which nests on the Midway Islands in the Pacific. And it's kind of the poster species for the issue of ingestion. So the adult birds build their nests and then they go off to forage nearby. But what they're encountering more often than not is not food, but plastic. And so it fills the stomachs of their young, and they cannot take in enough calories to build muscle mass and grow and thrive and fledge. And instead they die there. And one of the other issues is that of entanglement, or animals getting wrapped up in plastic pollution. This is a photo of the Australian fur seal from a park down at Phillips Island Nature Parks in Victoria, Australia. And the researcher who shared it with me said that at first they thought this animal had been hit on the back with maybe a boat propeller because of this gash on its neck, but as they were trying to help it, they found that actually at the bottom of the wound was just this small piece of strapping or ribbon string. So it's relatively lightweight and small, and yet it caused injuries that this animal was not able to survive. And a lot of what we know about entanglement and ingestion with different species comes from a book chapter written in 1997 by a researcher named David Laced. And he was the first person to go out and find all the different records of animals that were being affected. At that point, it was mostly anecdotal evidence, and he was just pulling it together. So at that time, over 20 years ago, we already knew that over 250 species were affected by entanglement, ingestion, or both. And researchers that updated that study in 2015 found that that number had already doubled to 557 species. I don't want you to get depressed. That's what I tell my students. We're not going to get depressed because researchers actually believe that this is a problem that can be solved. And they think to solve the problem, we need to think about the root causes, take local context into account, think about human behavior and how it affects this problem, perform education and outreach, and then create strong policy. So with that in mind, I applied to a grant in 2016 from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And the idea behind that grant is that I would get my students who were policy students, they're not scientists, and I would train them with some very simple methods to go out into the field and collect debris. And then we would analyze what we found and share the results with local policymakers, because I do think it's so important to try to make connections between science and the policy. So we went to Mex Point and Havanesset, and in just a couple of hours we found over 1,600 individual pieces of debris, and 76% of what we found was plastic. And then we analyzed what we found to try to understand its source. And what we found is that it's overwhelmingly what I would call municipal waste. It's the kind of thing that all of us, things that we all touch all the time. It wasn't anything exciting or dramatic. It hadn't come from a storm far away. It was cigarette butts and plastic water bottles. It was tops from brands you would recognize and flip-flops and children's toys. So based on that project, I applied to the Fulbright Foundation to get a grant to go and live with my family in Southwest India for 6 months. And this was in 2019. And the idea behind this project is that we would go and I would replicate that project. So I would train Indian students in these scientific methods. We would go out and do collections there and then share the results with local policymakers. And we did, it was wonderful. I was there with my family for 6 months near Thiruvananthapuram in southwest India in Kerala. And over that time we did several collections. We collected about 14,000 pieces of debris, and what we found was over 80% plastic. And just like in the United States, it was overwhelmingly what I would call municipal debris. And then working with a researcher there, I applied to funding from the National Geographic Society. And we asked if we could bring researchers and stakeholders from around India down to Kerala and train them in these methods so that then they could return to their communities and do cleanups there. And we got the funding and were able to do that. And we had 33 different researchers come down to Kerala for this workshop, and 10 of them went back to their home communities and did cleanups, which led to over 33,000 pieces of debris being picked up. Now, plastic was the most frequently found item in every single cleanup, but the proportion varied from 45% to 89% of what people were finding in different places. So it's 2019. I finished up this time in India. It was an amazing, amazing trip with my family. Come back to the University of Hartford. I'm working on some classes, everything's really coming together. Everything's really coming together for my research. I feel like I've got a lot of momentum. It's the end of 2019, and I'm planning trips for 2020. I'm going to return to India and work with researchers there. Yep. I'm going to go and work with 2 other National Geographic explorers, and we're going to do this workshop in Uganda. I had a workshop set up for March of that year in Colombia in South America, and you know what happened, right? Because it happened to all of us. All of that work got completely canceled. And it wasn't just that all got canceled, but my everyday job, which is, a little bit teaching, a little bit research, turned into all kinds of training that I wasn't prepared for in terms of getting about 60 faculty members from the University of Hartford who are in a program that I run ready to teach online for the first time. I have 3 children who began taking their schoolwork at home with, I would say, mixed results. And, we all experienced this. It was devastating. All of a sudden, all these plans I had for myself were not coming together. And I got really depressed and upset and frustrated. And I know I don't have to explain that to anyone in the world, because some of us are still feeling that way about sort of the last couple of years. But it made me start thinking about the way we tell stories. And I do have this arts background. And I thought, how could I use the arts to tell a different or a better or more honest story about plastic pollution? So when you read the research, the scientific literature about plastic pollution, they will say outright the 10 worst polluting countries are these. The 10 dirtiest rivers are these. And they are overwhelmingly places in South Asia and Southeast Asia. And from my experience there, you know, a big part of the problem is they don't have waste pickup. So all that plastic, single-use plastic that surrounds so much of the things that we use and that they use, just gets piled up, and maybe they burn it right next to, you know, where they live. Or they just pile it up, and then when the monsoons come through or other weather events, it just gets washed out into sea. And over in Middletown, where I live, you know, I put my plastic debris in a plastic bag, in a plastic bin. I get my sons to take it out to the street, but someone gets it down there, and then it gets picked up, and I never have to think about it again, right? But the truth is that in the best case scenario, that's going to be burned or buried. And so in a lot of ways, I felt we haven't solved this problem. We're just a little better at hiding it in the short term. So I thought, how could I use art to kind of tell that story? Because even though my family tries to avoid plastic, I don't know who can do it. It seems impossible. And so much of the food we eat is wrapped up in plastic. So I started thinking about that Laced book chapter from 1997, where he had listed the 250 plus species that were affected by plastic pollution. And 250 seemed like a lot, but within that list there was a list of 46 animals for which at that time we had records of both entanglement and ingestion. And so I thought I could make portraits of those animals and use film plastic to hand sew them. It sounds crazy, but you'll see it turned out okay. And to make it interesting, so these are the 46 animals. To make it interesting, I thought, let's do them all to scale, because that really, I'm a visual learner, I thought it would help me understand the scale of the problem. So some of them are cute little, you know, penguins and puffins, but my list also includes 3 whales, including the sperm whale and the bowhead whale. So my method is to just sketch out the animals on canvas, and then sometimes, you know, in a real kind of sketchy way. And then I just start sewing them. It's all hand sewn, and all of the smaller ones I do by myself. And I'm just going to show you the ones I've done so far. You might recognize products that you use. Those are all Old Navy bags in the background. So altogether there are 46 animals. I'm about 3/4 of the way through right now. And a few of them are large. Sorry, I don't want to miss that one. A few of them are quite large. And so for the largest ones, I'm doing them as a public art project. So I have an open space right now in Middletown where people can come and sew the whale with me. Let's see. These are all to scale. That's that albatross. So this is the first of the whales, the Minke Whale, which is 18 feet by 7 feet. And I took it around to camps last summer when things opened up again in Middletown and West Hartford and Hartford, and got folks to help me work on it, which was awesome. That's what it looks like.
Wow.
It's totally different from the aerial view versus the, you know, just looking at a view. And right now, I'm in a space on Main Street in Middletown, and we're working on the 60-foot long sperm whale. It's going to be about 20 feet by 60 feet altogether. You can see the Minke Whale there for proportion. It's coming together. It's so close. Like 2 weeks away, I think. So in gray are the ones I've already finished, and the green ones are the ones I'm still kind of working on. So I think I'm about 3/4 of the way through. So for me, I see such value in trying to pull in the science and the policy and the art. And I think it helps me at least tell a more honest story about the way I interact with plastic, for sure. But I also think it can help us understand, like really complex problems in different, maybe better ways.